Welcome to Attic Raiders Retro Reviews, where today we're going to do something a little bit different. I don't have a board game review for you today, but instead we're going to take a board game which has got some quite nice components in it, and we're going to do a bit of work on them in order to up-level them and make them look really great. We're going to do that with the game Volcano Island Countdown, which was released in 2012 by Spin Master. Now this game has got some quite nice three-dimensional components in it, but I feel that they've been let down a bit with the finish. The colour of plastic that they've been moulded in and the fact that they are not painted, I think lets it down. And if we changed that, if we added a bit more detail, a bit of coloration to it, and a little bit extra with some model making, I think this could look absolutely superb. So let's take a look at what components the game does come with and see where we can go from there. The game's Tiki piece has got a really nice sculpt on the front. It looks really good, but unfortunately on the back they've gone for this really strange design. I'm not sure why they have done this. It might be in order to save material, but I don't see why they couldn't have just made the Tiki hollow in that case. So I think what I'm going to do is fill this back piece here and then paint this, because that will look so much nicer painted up. The central volcano piece here looks like it's got a lot of potential, but again it's been cast in this single colour of green plastic, which in my opinion really doesn't go with the rocky looking theme that's got here. And again, the idol here has been cast in this translucent red plastic. Now that would be good if at any point the idol actually lit up, but it doesn't. So having it made from a translucent see-through plastic is really kind of pointless. I think there's just a lot of nice details on here which would come up really well if this was painted. Now they've obviously spent a lot of time on designing the Tiki and the main central volcano unit, but when it came to the actual playing pieces here, they really seem to have dropped the ball. These to me look more like stand-ins from the design phase, kind of prototypes where they've just gone, yeah, that's good enough, we'll use that in the actual game. They are really flat and two-dimensional with no details on there at all, and I think that those are just really poor. There's not really anything that you could do to those in terms of paint in order to up-level them. So for this game to make it better, I think those need to be replaced entirely. And for this theme of game, I think these would make really good replacements. These are from the Indiana Jones DVD adventure game, and I think they would work perfectly. Or alternatively, there's these pieces from the Temple Run Danger Chase board game, which again I think would go really nicely. I think particularly with these pieces, they do keep the kind of Running Man style of the Volcano Island Countdown game, but with a much more detailed three-dimensional nature to them. So these I really like. Of course, as I've painted up all the other three-dimensional pieces in this game, I should really go ahead and paint these to a more realistic coloration. However, these are from a board game that I don't have extra spares of, so I'm not actually going to paint these at the moment. And besides, that would mean that this video would be far longer. So just now, I'm just going to leave these as they are and use these as placeholders. So what I've done with this is I've simply taken some tin foil and using a bamboo skewer, I have stuffed that into the spaces between these fins, and then I've used some 2-part epoxy milliput in order to fill in this back section here and then sanded it down. So that is now looking much nicer, I think anyway, and I will paint that and that will get looking much better. Paint added and it's come up really nicely. Instead of that vivid orange plastic, it almost looks as if it has actually been carved from wood, like a traditional Tiki. Now for this I just started with a really dark brown base coat and then dry brushed a lighter, more chocolatey brown over the top of these highlighted areas here to add a bit of contrast. I then used a black which I thinned down and painted carefully into the crevices and the deep areas, thinning out the edges of it and blending that so that there's no hard edges. And you can see that's really made those crevices and details pop, and that's really looking good. And of course I added a little bit of red to the eyes just to give the Tiki that real kind of evil look to him. And this, I think, is a really, really nice looking game piece. It almost looks like it would come from the Jumanji board game. So what I've done here is I've unscrewed it at the bottom and opened it up so that I could remove the Tiki button here so that I could paint that a lot easier without getting paint on the volcano surrounding it here. So you can see I've gone for a kind of grey rocky feel on the volcano here with a more kind of light yellowy beige colour on the altars here to give it a more kind of Aztec or Egyptian feel almost. And of course, to help it blend into the game board, I've added some green kind of vegetation coloration on here, and I've deliberately painted that onto the high surfaces where seeds might kind of drop onto there and grow, and into the deep crevices between the rocks, again where seeds and things would get trapped and where vegetation would naturally grow. When I was painting, I went for a very dark grey with some lighter grey dry brushing on here, and I've got two different shades of green here mottled and blended in the crevices here. For the altars, I started with a light brown and then used a more yellowy tan colour to dry brush these highlights on. And it doesn't show up hugely, but there is some black thinned down and painted into these crevices just to highlight those shadows and crevices a bit more. With the basic painting finished, I want to add a little bit of vegetation, but without going completely overboard, because again, this is after all a board game and it will have to be stored in a box. It's not going to be a piece that's out on display all the time. So it's important not to have flocking or foam or anything like that that's going to crumble and fall off easily. Once I finished painting the volcano, I took some of these pre-made flocked tufts of grass here, which you can get from any hobby store or from online. And these are applied onto little kind of glue dots so that you can just peel them off of this backing paper and stick them wherever you want. And once I had those, I then looked at the crevices and the highlighted points here, the high points where bushes and things would grow, and the crevices, the deep points where seeds and things would gather, and I applied them into those places. And I think you will agree that that looks really, really good. It is such an improvement on what was there originally. And of course you can also see that I have applied some tiny little skulls here, which have actually come from Warhammer, and I just removed some excess material from those skulls and painted them up and glued them in place there. And I think that is a really nice little touch, adds a little more element of danger to the Tiki. You can see that by removing the Tiki button, it makes it much easier to get in and paint all that detail. You can see here is the original kind of translucent red that the whole thing was made from, and I've painted it just with a base color of a dark brown here, and then gone over it with some dry brushing of a much lighter brown, and that has come up really, really nice. The detail on this, which you could not see before because it was kind of slightly see-through, has come up really, really nicely. I've also gone with a thin black wash and painted carefully into the dark deep crevices there so that that detail really pops. And I've added some red just for that real evil look in the eyes, and just kind of highlighted the teeth there, again just using a tiny paintbrush in order to paint those, and that looks really nice, I think. With the volcano top removed, you can see the electronics inside the base here. We've got the activation button here, we've got an LED for lighting up the volcano, we've got the 4 sensors around here which are used to tell if one of those Tiki tokens has been placed in there, and we've got the speaker where the sound comes out. And you can see this spring here is where the Tiki button would go, so that when that's pushed down, this piece here on the back presses the button down, which activates the system. And as you can see, the light here, there is no way that that light is going to go through this transparent plastic and have this light up. So there's no point in that being transparent at all. With the Tiki button put back in place, the electronics put back in, and everything screwed together, I think you'll agree that that looks so much better than how the game originally came. It's really up-leveled that a huge amount, and that now looks amazing. One final thing that I wanted to do is that the Tiki Tempo here, where players go when they've been captured, should have this kind of rustic, tribal looking fence around it with burning braziers and a little gateway to get into it. And I'd really like to have this being a 3D element as well. So what I did was I took some bamboo skewers here just from the supermarket, and I thought that if we used those along here, cut to the correct size, then I could glue those together in order to create a fence around here, which would be a really nice touch. So making sure that I measured them out against the game board as I was making them, I created little sections of fence here which could then be glued together. Again, just using the hobby knife to cut those down to the right length, but making sure that they were slightly different lengths so that you get this kind of uneven top to it here. Once each section of fence had been made, then those could be glued together and then painted. At that point, I also wanted flames on the top of some of those posts, so I added a tiny bit of hot glue to the top of each one, and then as it was drying, used a bamboo skewer again to agitate that hot glue and move it around into a more of a flame type shape. And once that was dry, I could then paint it to look like fire. And you can see, I think that those have turned out rather nicely. And that fits exactly over the top of the printed fence on the game board. And again, the other one fits in exactly over the top of the printed fence on the other side. So now we've got a Tiki Tempo which actually has a 3-dimensional fence around it to keep those players prisoner. I think you'll agree that overall that really was a worthwhile exercise, and it's really upgraded this game to the next level. It's gone from a game that looked quite cool to one that now looks really, really amazing. Well, I had fun with that, and I hope you enjoyed seeing exactly what I did with it. It always surprises me what you can do with a touch of paint, a bit of patience, and a little smidge of know-how. I think you'll agree that the game now looks fantastic, so much better than the original factory finish, and this is a game that I think really deserves that. It's one which I will be reviewing in the future, so keep an eye out for that. Until next time though, this is Attic Raiders Retro Reviews.